He is risen. He is risen indeed. And obviously you can tell already this is a little different than usual. My shirt says, "We are never too old for Disney." We never are too old for Disney. We're never too old for a lot of things. This time in our lives has taught us that. We have learned to adapt to many different situations, many different activities. We're never too old, whether we're 100, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, down to our 30s, 20s, and teens, and maybe even younger. Today, if you remember anything about the last 12 years, is the Sunday after Easter. It's also Holy Humor Sunday. And right now, what I'm going to try to do is bring a little medicine of humor to our lives right now. I'll never forget the time when I looked out on a Holy Humor Sunday and everyone stared back at me with big red noses on. Or right over here when Thelma Poff stood up one Sunday wearing her one-piece bikini nightgown. Thank you, Becky, for the red noses. It is amazing how much humor can change one's attitude. Holy Humor Sunday started out of the Eastern Orthodox tradition. Bright Sunday, it's also called, and they have parties throughout the week celebrating the fact that God played the ultimate cosmic joke on death, the ultimate joke on Satan, the ultimate joke on all the forces of evil. They thought they had ridded the world of a problem, and they had not. The problem never did exist, only in their minds. God brought his beloved back, is alive. Christ is risen indeed. Kay and I got exposed to Holy Humor Sunday when we were in Warren, Pennsylvania, and attending the First Presbyterian Church there. We went to service on the Sunday after Easter and were presented, when we walked in, New Year's Eve horns. And we knew that something was definitely different when the choir walked in bathrobes and pajamas. We thank the Reverend Dr. David Leininger for exposing us to Holy Humor Sunday. And every time during that service the word amen was said, we were to toot our horns, and there was a lot of tooting going on that day. Holy Humor Sunday is a reminder of the divine purpose of God, the divine purpose that we so desperately need right now. So let's get started. There was a lady on a Saturday afternoon that was preparing her dinner for Easter Sunday the next day, and there was a knock on the door, and she went to find a man that was dressed in shabby clothes, looking for some odd jobs to do. He asked her if there was anything that he could do, and she asked him, "Can you paint?" And he says, "Oh yes, I'm a very good painter." "Well, there's 2 gallons of green paint and a brush, and there's a porch out back. I would like you to paint that, and if you do a really good job, I'll pay you for what it's worth." He goes, "I will have it done very quickly." So she went back to baking and really didn't think anything about it. And a little while later, knock on the door, and it was obvious that he had been painting because there was green paint all over him. And she asked if he had finished the job, and he said, "Oh, yes, I did, and I did a very good job. But by the way, that is not a Porsche out back, it's a Mercedes." Easter is full of surprises, and we need to continue to celebrate the good news of last Sunday. Jesus was dead, now he's alive. The women came to the tomb in despair and left in delight. He is risen. He is risen indeed. But as good as that news is, we are still being bombarded with the news of today, every hour, every day. It is hard to hear the number of lives being lost. It is hard to hear about the families dealing with their loss. It is hard to hear about the extent and depth and breadth of this sickness. It is hard to hear about people's hardship in losing their jobs. I don't know about you, but it just breaks your heart. The devastation that we're talking about, this coronavirus, began far before last Easter Sunday, and it still continues today. But what we cannot do is lose the power, lose the strength of the good news that Jesus Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And the lectionary text of the gospel lesson is the same lesson on this second Sunday after Easter that it is year after year after year after year. And it is a lesson we need to hear right here and right now. So if you want to pause here and go and read, the text that I'm using is from the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 19 through 31. The Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 19 through 31. The disciples, at least most of them, are locked in a room. Can you relate to that, being locked away? They are scared to death. They are scared to death that if they come out, the same fate that met their master on the hill on Calvary will meet them. Do we not think twice about leaving our homes today? We heard the story about the empty tomb from the women. The disciples heard the story, as we did, from the women about the empty tomb, but to them, sitting in this locked room, it was just that, a story. There was no confirmation. But then, suddenly, there stood Jesus Christ, right there among them in the room. And he offers them these words, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." When the risen Christ said those words, it wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a, "Hi, how you doing?" It was an announcement. It was a proclamation. Peace be with you. Jesus was telling them, he is telling us that all is well. All is well. Peace be with you. All is well. It's going to be all right. Peace be with you regarding your past. How successful do you think you would be if you tried to drive your car forward while looking backwards out the back window? There's a crash going to happen, and it's going to happen pretty soon. Jesus was telling them, "Peace be with you," the disciples and us. You don't have to look behind anymore. Just keep your eyes pointed forward because you have been forgiven. Concentrate on forward. Don't worry about the past. All is well. Maybe Jesus was remembering a story that we can't seem to find in any of the scriptures, but it was when John found Peter and he ran up to him excitedly and said, "Peter, I've got good news and I've got bad news." And Peter took hold of John by the shoulders and tried to shake him and calm him down and said, "Take it easy, John. What is the good news?" And John said, "The good news is Christ is risen." And Peter said, "That's great. But what's the bad news?" John looked around and he said, "He seems to be really steamed about last Friday." Well, we know that that story never actually happened. But here's what we do know. Jesus said, "Peace be with you." He gave the disciples and us peace with our past. Peace be with you in the present. Do we need peace right now in our lives? Our lives and the people all over the world, their lives are being impacted each and every day. I want you to stop and think about what I just said. Every corner of the world is being impacted by this coronavirus now, right now. No one is untouched. No one is immune. You need to come to grips with that. We are no different than any other people in any other corner of the world. They are impacted just as we are. We are people of faith, but there's many people in this world who are not. We know why Jesus died. And we know that Jesus wants to bring peace to our lives, their lives, and the world. We have sung it so many times. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other is sinking sand. We walk on a solid rock of faith. Jesus will take all of this hurt, all of this pain, all of this chaos, all of this destruction, and he will create something beautiful from it. Peace be with you. The entire world and every person in it, right here and right now. Peace be with you for our future. We now, more than any other time, need to be able and should be able to relate to the story in the Gospel of John about Thomas. Thomas didn't always doubt, even though that's the aspect of Thomas that people seem to relate to most. Read chapter 11 in the Gospel of John, and you will see a Thomas who is supporting. He is a supporting Thomas, willing to, in fact, die for Christ. If you go to the Gospel of John in chapter 14, you will find a Thomas that is very thoughtful. When Jesus was telling them where he was to go, Thomas said, "We do not know where you're going." How are we to know? And Christ's answer to him was, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And Thomas got it. He was thoughtful enough and he understood. A doubting Thomas, a supporting Thomas, a thoughtful Thomas. Those three aspects would make for a pretty good sermon alone, but not today. We're going to talk about how we are coming face to face with our own doubt. There are many who are in that boat of doubt right now. I know I have been. I know you have been. Life today is delivering us gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. The joy of Easter this year happened right in the middle of all of this, and it's hard. It's extremely hard to call ourselves Easter people. Given the world that we're living in, and Dr. Amy Atkin, the State of Ohio Health Director, as she has said many times during her daily address, is this feels like Groundhog Day over and over again. Well, it's got to feel that way to us too, but instead of Groundhog Day, it more feels like Good Friday over and over again. The doors are again locked. The stay-at-home orders are in place. Doubt is starting to take root, and now Jesus is saying in that room to the disciples who are there, put your hand in my wound. Put your hand to my side. Stop doubting and believe. Read that text very carefully because Thomas never touched Christ. He never confirmed what he doubted. He heard, he saw, and he believed. And we need to do the same thing. We need to respond just like Thomas responded. My Lord and my God, without fear, without doubt. My Lord and my God. When Jesus said, peace be with you, he was giving Thomas, he was giving the disciples, he was giving us forgiveness of our past, a solid foundation for today, and an unbelievable hope for tomorrow. It was a couple of weeks after the resurrection when someone approached Joseph of Arimathea and articulated their surprise at him for allowing Jesus to use his very expensive hand-hewn tomb. And Joseph simply responded, shrugged his shoulder, and said, he only needed it for the weekend. Will you join me in prayer? Because Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Lord, you know that life in this world is not easy, particularly now. Through the Holy Spirit, help us to use humor and laughter when appropriate as a tremendous, powerful medicine. Help us to realize that happiness and cheer will overpower gloom and despair. Never let us forget your message of peace, which speaks to our past, our present, and our future. May we share with one another the healing and the wholeness shared with us through your beloved, your Son, Jesus Christ. In his name, amen.